Welcome to the Recovery 2.0 conference. I'm your host, Tommy Rosen, and I'm so pleased to be speaking with Nikki Myers. Nikki is a yoga therapist, somatic experiencing practitioner, and certified addictions recovery specialist. She is the founder of Y12SR, the yoga of 12-step recovery, which was born from her personal struggle with addiction. Y12SR meetings are available all over the United States, and the curriculum is rapidly becoming a feature of addiction recovery treatment centers. Nikki is a co-founder of the annual Yoga, Meditation, and Recovery conferences at both Esalen Institute and the Kripalu Center. Nikki, thank you once again for lending your voice to the Recovery 2.0 community. Welcome.
Tommy, it's beyond my pleasure to be a part of this. I'm so grateful, and I love being with you.
Thank you. Well, Nikki, I think this is our eighth interview.
Amazing.
As this is our eighth Recovery 2.0 online conference, so
I love it.
We just keep going. So, Nikki, I wanted to dive into this space that your work focuses on, which is this space where yoga and the 12 steps meet.
Yes.
So I wanted to begin with a 12-step principle and look at it both from the 12-step side and also from the yogic side.
Yes.
So let's begin with the principle of surrender. Obviously, a critical idea on any spiritual path. Surrender seems to play a place, and yet it is such a, by many, it's such a despised concept or a misunderstood concept. So
right.
I'd love to discuss that.
Right. I love that. And there's such a paradox to that. When we talk about that, I was speaking about a little earlier, the paradox of it all. They say in program, you surrender to win, right? And the first time I heard that, I'm like, what in the hell are they talking about? How do you win if you surrender? Oh my God. What does that mean? But it really does mean just that. When I let go of, number one, the illusion of control, that, I have control over any of this, there is a freedom, there's an exhale with that allows me to open up to something else completely different, to a whole nother possibility that, I like to describe as beyond the matrix, beyond the good, bad, right, wrong, inferior, superior, beyond this matrix. And my experience with that is that it's only possible for that to happen once I let go, once I completely let go. My biggest thing, and even on my computer, I use this as an image and in various places around my house. I keep thinking, and knowing that this very moment I'm standing on a rock that is spinning in space, right? So it's moving, it's spinning, right? All the time. It's changing, right? And part of my stuckness gets in, I want things to go the way that I want them to go. And I want it, when it's good, I want to keep it good. Right? And when it's bad, I want to run away from it being bad, right? Forgetting that it's moving and changing the whole time, that it's all moving. And so I try and hang on and all that. And for me, the big principle in both the 12-step program and in yoga are these deeper and deeper and deeper levels of surrender, these deeper and deeper levels of letting go to open up for the possibility of what's beyond.
So I think one of the challenges people have in trying to understand this concept is if you let go and you're letting go of, as you put it, the illusion of control, who's going to be in control? Who's taking the wheel here?
Well, I think of it this way, back to my little image. There is something that keeps this rock spinning in place. There is some energy. There is something. I don't know what it is, and I'm not giving it a name, and I'm not, saying is this, that, the other. But the fact is, this rock is spinning in space, and there's something that keeps it there. So I think of my work as aligning with whatever it is that's keeping this rock spinning in space.
I love it. I love it. Now, what's interesting also is I look back at my own history of, I'm thinking about the particular part of my history at the end of my active addiction with drugs and alcohol. So we're going back 27, 28 years now. I was a young man at some point there. And
you were?
It's true. There are pictures to prove it.
I love it.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know, Nikki, if I ever told you this part of my story, but I was in Boulder and I was going to a therapist at the end of my using. I can't remember her name, literally. I would go into her office and I would be in tears every week. Literally, I'd just break down crying every single week. I was a cocaine addict, active cocaine addict. I couldn't stop. And she would say to me, you've simply got to go to some meetings. You've got to go to some meetings. And I say, it's just not for me. I won't be one of those people. I'm not going to do this. She's like,
those people, huh?
One of those people, and she's like, well, you've got to go to treatment. And I was like, absolutely out of the question. I'm not going to treatment. And there I am, literally tears pouring down my face. I can't help myself. I'm not letting her help me. I'm not in a state of surrender at all. But I'm also actually pretty aware of the fact that I'm not in control either.
Yeah.
I'm in that really sort of messed up place where you're like, okay, I don't think I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
And having a realization like there's no way out of this because I can't stop and I won't stop.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a place like that?
Yeah. There's a term that I've learned for it, and I've loved this term. That's the liminal space. That liminal space, right there, where I knew that I couldn't go back, but I had too much fear and too much whatever it was to go anywhere, to go forward, right? And so it was this paralysis, this liminal space of just being there. Yeah. And, what I discovered, and this is an important part for me of what yoga, we're talking about this is the relationship of the 12 steps of yoga. I can feel that, right? I know when I'm in that space, that feels like that place of doubt. It feels like this place of resignation. And I've discovered that a lot of folks are confused about the difference between resignation. Resignation says, oh shit, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I'm messed up. I know I can't go back and I won't go back. So you resign, right? You resign. And that feels like a contraction, a hardness, that kind of thing in the body. And people will sometimes confuse that for surrender. Right? That will often get confused for surrender. And what I'll point out is that surrender doesn't feel that way. Surrender feels like in the yoga practice, at the end of the practice, that shavasana, that shavasana where you just let go, you let gravity take you, you just let go. And that's such an incredible sensateness in the body when I have that's surrender. And what I'll tell people all the time is if you're confused about what surrender is, if it doesn't feel like shavasana at the end of the practice, then don't bullshit yourself. That's not surrender. You haven't surrendered, right?
There's another misconception I think people have about this word surrender, because sometimes we come to a surrender, like so after a few weeks later, after going to this therapist's office, a few months later, I finally did surrender to the idea that I needed help. it came from a place of desperation.
Yes.
And I think there may be some confusion there as well. Like this, surrender isn't coming necessarily from a place of desperation. Those two things aren't necessarily in the same ballpark.
Not necessarily in the same ballpark, and that's an and. They can be, right? So sometimes it takes a breakdown to facilitate a breakthrough, right? And so sometimes that place of desperation, for me, when I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, as we talk about in the program, when I knew I just can't do this anymore, I can't do this anymore.
Yes.
Then I let go. But it took that breakdown in order to move to the surrender of the breakdown.
Yes.
In order to move to the breakthrough. But it's not necessarily that way. It doesn't necessarily work that way for me all the time. There are points in my life now where knowing and having felt the beauty of what it is to surrender, that I can surrender willingly today, and that's different than it used to be, but now I got a taste of it, right? I got a taste of it, and I know the possibility.
And no less profound of a surrender for what could come next.
Exactly. Exactly.
So this word control and this word manipulation.
Yeah.
It seems to me that when we talk about people who are in active addiction, and that can be any form of addiction, there does seem to be an element of, I am actively engaged in trying to manipulate people and reality to fit what I feel is going to bring me to a place of, I don't know, comfort or happiness or just getting me through.
Yeah.
What's on the other side of a surrender from manipulation? Does manipulation just go away when you surrender for the first time?
And manipulation is really subtle, right? And it definitely doesn't go away. And I call, I got this from, I heard it once in a meeting, and someone actually I'm really close to right now said it, is that was the whole thing that the addiction was really all about. I'm looking to manipulate outcomes, right? And just because I get clean doesn't mean I stop looking to manipulate outcomes. I do look to manipulate outcomes, right? The thing for me, the yoga offers this to this whole conversation, and which is why, you and I are so much into, I love this combination of yoga and the 12 steps. I assert that the 12 steps are absolutely brilliant. When they're really understood, oh my God, they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. And what I heard about this manipulation, right? The looking to manipulate an outcome. Number one, I know that it never works, right? That there's the possibility of something much, much I can only see with this limited database that's here. I got a limit on what I know and what I can believe. When I let go and allow for something bigger in order to happen, the possibilities are endless, right? Where these are very limited. I think of control, and again, I got this from an image from someone who showed it to me one time. It's like I used to carry one with me all the time. You remember those Chinese finger torture things?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the harder you try to get your finger out of those things, the more you're stuck, right? It's when I relax, I release, I let go, then my finger just slides out of the torture thing gently.
That's right.
So that's the image that always comes to mind. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes so much sense. So thank you. And I want to talk about, so the principle of surrender is sort of, in a way, for many people, it's the beginning, right? You have to have that. And many people, of course, feel, as we've been speaking about, that to surrender is a point of weakness.
Yeah.
It can only be considered that way to somebody who's been basing their life upon their own self-will.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I notice how many people, and really this is true of folks in the contemplative areas and, I want to say the yoga community, but I'm not even sure what that is. So, but generally have a problem with the first step of the 12-step program. And the word that really stumps a lot of people is that word powerless, right? That we're powerless over, what it says is we're powerless over our addiction, and that our lives have become unmanageable, or we're powerless over alcohol, or whatever the substance or behavior is. We're powerless over that, and our lives have become unmanageable. And what I like to point out, because for me, together with surrender, what has to go with surrender, for me, for it to be full, is acceptance. You need both, both those things. I surrender to this, and I accept and tell the truth about what is, right? Now I am aware, right? And once I've got that awareness, once I accept that this is true, that there's a whole world of possibility that opens up. So out of that acceptance, that surrender, that powerlessness becomes an empowerment that's available that is beyond the duality of good, bad, right, wrong.
It's so counterintuitive, especially in our Western mind. It's so counterintuitive. But you mentioned the word honesty, and I think we should continue because that's our next principle.
Love it.
So I want to talk about the principle of honesty, both as we see it on the yoga mat in practice, also as we see it expressed in the 12 steps.
Yep. And I love to add a word to honesty. For me, I've discovered, and working in doing the work that I've done in the world and with me for these years, the word that belongs in front of that for me is radical. It's a radical, fierce, fearless honesty that's required. And
ew.
I know.
Who wants that?
It really is. It really is. It is so easy for me to bullshit myself. I will rationalize and justify and make excuses and do all of those other things.
Yes. This radical honesty you speak of, clearly not many people's first inclination. How does one develop this? Is this a natural talent? Can someone get better at it? What are we talking about here?
It's definitely, I don't think I put it in the category of a natural talent. Yeah. As a matter of fact, a lot of times it's something that we consciously avoid. Out of fear. The yogis talk about this tree that they call the obstacles, the kleshas, the obstacles, and one of those is fear, right? And it's almost a fear that if I always tell the story that I make up stories in my head and they all end in, and I'm gonna die, right? And that's it. I'm afraid that if I look deeply enough, the analogy that I use, I use a lot of times when I'm teaching, is this little book that a lot of us saw, growing up. Even I saw it before I could read. And the title of the book was "There's a Monster at the End of This Book," right? It's a Sesame Street book. And it's Grover. And Grover is, every time he says the first page you turn to, it says, didn't you read the cover? It says there's a monster at the end of this book, right? And so Grover creates all these strategies so that you don't turn the page, because if you turn the page, you're going to get to the end of the book, and it says that there's a monster at the end of the book, right? And I think that's a lot of our fear, that if we are radically honest, that we're going to go that deep and we're going to find a monster at the end of the book. And there is no monster at the end of the book. Just like at the end of that book, when Grover went through all that process, all the strategies and, you know, all these things he did to create us from not turning the page.
Yes.
To the last page of the book, and it says, oh my God, there's just me, this furry, lovable little Grover, right? And that's what we get to look at. And this is, you know, a lot in the 12-step program, that 4th step process, you know, that self-inquiry that yoga invites us to, that, you know, that whole thing going deep inside of there, chipping away at all that is not us, taking away all that is not us. And it does. You got to put your, you know, I like to say, for me, my big girl panties, right? You
gotta put on your big girl panties?
You got to put on your... Got to put on your big girl panties for that one, right? And it takes support, and it takes, you know, all of those kinds of things to look honestly at oneself.
Nikki, and also, of course, there's a physical translation for this in practice on the yoga mat. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because it does seem like, you know, to move along any kind of path of any kind, whether it's spiritual or you're trying to build a building or you're trying to do something, it's going to require honesty.
Absolutely.
How about with just the physical form, the body, and trying to, say, increase flexibility? What do we notice about honesty on the yoga mat?
Again, I love to teach this relative to the physical practice in terms of something else that we use a lot in the 12-step program, which is the Serenity Prayer. Now, of course, the Serenity Prayer didn't come from the 12-step program. It was far before that. But it's something that's used a lot often, very often. And the whole idea is learning, and this applies to the yoga mat, that edge line, that middle path, which is the wisdom to know the difference, right? Because on the mat, you know, and I'll talk about this a lot in practices, when we do too much, we risk injury. But when we do too little, we risk atrophy, right? And we're looking for that middle path. We're looking for the middle path, which is the wisdom to know the difference. Which the beauty of, again, this coupling is that that's something that I can feel. That's something sensate that I can feel. So I can know on or off my mat, whether I'm doing too much, right? I'm moving into the realm of injury, either at the physical, emotional, spiritual level, any of those levels. Or I'm doing too little, right? Where I risk atrophy, which, you know, sooner or later, that's going to go the other way. What I'm looking for is that middle space.
I love it. I love it. I'm thinking now that the beginner practitioner may not actually be sensitized to know when too much is too much.
That's right. That's right.
There may be, if a person is a type A person like I am, and
that's right,
you could injure yourself just by being in your personality without having the sensibility to know where you need to rein it in.
That's me. That was me.
Well, that's part of the sensitivity training of yoga and the 12 steps.
It is.
There's a wonderful example of this in nature where if a very young rattlesnake bites you, it's particularly dangerous because they empty all of their venom into you.
Wow.
They don't know any better. They don't know that they're not actually trying to kill you. They just don't know any better. The adult rattlesnake will just put a little bit of venom in you, much less dangerous. So it's an interesting idea. But also on the other side, if you lean towards being a little bit more on the lazy side of things, and you spoke about the word atrophy,
right?
You could easily just sort of not really show up on your yoga mat.
That's right. I can excuse it away. And I always tell people the yoga mat for me is this beautiful little laboratory. This rectangular space is my laboratory. And I really get to look deeply at me, you know, and it depends. It's day to day and all of this. But the beauty is, like with step one, I got the awareness to really witness myself as I'm on the yoga mat. And it ain't about making myself bad or awful or wrong or any of that kind of stuff. It's like, look at here, you know, what, you know, check this out, you know, what you're doing with this. And on any day, it can go either way.
Yes.
Right? I'll think about myself. I love in the practices, the yoga practices that I lead, I like holds. I like long holds, right? So we hold in a posture. I love that BKS Iyengar said, you know, your yoga really starts when you want to get out of the posture, right? Because that's when you get to, you're in that decision, that liminal space again, right? I'm making a decision. But it's interesting to watch myself when I'm in my own long holds. Some days, you know, if I'm doing this with a teacher, I'll start blaming the teacher. You know, what the hell is she doing? What the hell is he doing? Why is he holding us in there so long? By the way, I've done this with you, right?
I'm sorry.
I've done this with you, right? What the hell is he doing? He doesn't know what he's doing. Why the hell is he keeping us in this so long? Right? Or other days, I'll blame myself, right? Oh, I'm a loser. I can't stay in this. Everybody else is staying in this. What's wrong with me? Right. Either way, it's an interesting thing to watch. And the beauty of the yoga mat, you know, and the witness to that, I get to watch that. We say, because how you do anything is how you do everything. If I'm doing it that way on the yoga mat, then I'm doing it that way someplace in my life, right? So thank God I get to witness it here. So I'm not doing it in a way that it affects my relationships, that it affects my work, that it affects, you know, my relationship with my children and my grandchildren and things like that. I get to witness it here, right? And that's the beauty of the practice.
It's interesting. As you come to recovery or you come to the mat, as I was saying before, you may not have the sensitivity to actually be able to tell the true from the false.
Yes.
On the yoga mat, that means you may be pushing too hard for your body, or you may be not applying yourself and showing up.
Right.
In life, you literally may not be in that moment able to tell the truth.
Yeah.
I like, you know, when I was insane in drug addiction, when I first got sober, I literally had a hard time figuring out what really was the story here. What's going on, and like, what am I seeing and perceiving? And it would take a while and healing and detoxification, purification of the body to be able to see clearly and think clearly. Again, a long time for me. But what dawns on me is this quote from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where we use this term, the people who tend not to make it are, and this is the term, may be constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. It is not their fault. And what I was always told when I came into the 12 steps was, you're not one of those people. You have the ability to tell the difference between true and false. And if you have that ability, then there's no reason why you can't get this thing. That underlines the importance, as Dr. Bob and Bill W. saw it, of honesty on this path. Important.
Yeah. And here's the beautiful thing again about the deepening that happens for me, and I've seen in relationship with this with others, is that there's a sensate feeling I can feel when I am being dishonest or honest. And what I love about that is the body always tells me first, right? That there's a quality, a sensate quality to dishonesty. That when I'm aware, when I'm in that state of awareness, that I can feel, right? And that's going to give me my first clue, right? And for me, that's what the yoga practice adds to this. It gives me that ability. You know, I talk about this as relapse prevention, right? So because I can feel this, and then with that awareness, I can make a decision. Maybe I need a tool to help me get back in balance. I'm out of balance when I'm being dishonest, right? Maybe I need to call somebody and talk about this. Maybe I need to go to a meeting. Maybe I need a group discussion. Maybe I just need to stop and breathe and meditate. Maybe, you know, it's breath. Maybe I'm out of alignment that way. I've got a whole set of tools that I can use now. But the big deal is being aware when I'm out of balance.
Yes. And I can so see how if you can't be honest with yourself in the moment, it's going to be very hard for you to pick up the tools that are available to you.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So, Nikki, the next principle I want to look at is the principle of service. But in looking at service, I want to look at it as, I want to look at the other elements within yoga and also within the path of the 12 steps that lead us or get us ready for service.
Right.
So one of the things is self-study. Another thing is clearing the past.
Right.
Clearing the past, getting present. Can we talk about those things? So self-study and clearing the past. Right.
So, you know, in the yoga talks about svadhyaya, which is self-study. It also talks about vichara. Vichara is inquiry, right? And particularly in this relationship, self-inquiry. And for me, this is a big part. I've heard, you know, when we're talking about the steps, I've heard it phrased this way, and it's a way that I really love. It's steps 1 through 3 are where we give up. So that's the surrender. Steps 4, 5, and 6 are where we clean up. So this is that inquiry. This is this place where we clean up. That steps 7, 8, and 9 are where we make up, right? So we're making our relationships right. We're making our relationships right. And steps 10 through 12 are where we grow up, right? So, and I really, really, really love that. I really love that. So those steps, it's actually 4 through 7, 4, 5, 6, and 7, which are the makeup, are the cleanup steps, right? And this is where we're in this deep set of self-reflection, this deep set of honesty about self in order to clean up. The analogy we use in Y12SR is one that I've adapted for this work that I got from my teacher, one of my teachers, which is Gary Kraftstone, right? And he was speaking using this analogy that the ancients give, that as this human, we're a vessel. And we use this in Y12SR all the time. We use it as we read the steps. Addiction turns my vessel upside down. So in my case, I was in the water for 30 some odd years, totally upside down. Steps 1 through 3 are the steps that help turn that vessel back right side up. So it's been upside down for all these years. So I'm upside down. Now I'm back right side up. I've applied these foundation steps, but I'm still full of shit. I'm still full of it, right? I've been upside down for 34 years, so I'm still full of shit, right? So steps 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the steps that help clean that vessel out. We start that process. We do that self-inquiry. We do that stuff to clean that vessel out, to start to prepare it for sale. We start to prepare it for sale. Steps 8 and 9 are where we make our relationships right, right? We go back, right? We go do what we need to do to make our relationships right, right? And what we find, what I have found, really at the heart of those steps is that it's, again, kind of one of those paradoxes. because it's really not about the other person. I mean, ultimately it's about self-forgiveness, right? Ultimately, it is me. It's all about me and relationship with me. Ultimately, right. Going past that small s self, right. And in order to get beyond that small s self, I got to bring her in, accept all parts of her, right. And part of that is the forgiveness, right. And that's what this offers us. And at the heart of that is really forgiving ourselves. Is really self-forgiveness.
And so in this self-forgiveness, I'm looking at that in a way as in a way of emptying oneself, making room. And then with space, with that newfound room, that newfound space, you can then do something with it.
Absolutely.
And that's that service piece. So I think on the way that I see this reflected on the path of yoga, physical practice, pranayama practice, whatever the practices are, is that they're helping to build vitality into the body so you have more energy.
Right.
Build immunity so you're immune from sickness and maybe dark energy.
Right.
But also building intuition and opening oneself up to a higher level of an open level of consciousness so that you can then sort of reach further, go further, be fully you in this way.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I've been using this analogy a lot lately because, it's so reminiscent of, again, what I feel. I'm at that age, I remember this, I know how old you're about to be, so you probably remember this too. I love it. When I was growing up, there was this big box that sat in our living room, right? And in the living room, and we'd all gather around this box because it was if we could see the whole world on this little box, right? And all these tubes coming out of it, the whole 9 yards. But a lot of times, every once in a while, real early on, because this was a big box at that time, and a lot of times what would happen was all of a sudden you'd be watching this thing and all the static and all the nonsense and everything would go, the box would go crazy. And you see all this noise and all this static and all this. And my father would literally have to get up. He'd go up on the rooftop of the house.
Yes, he did.
Yes. And he would sometimes it was a silly millimeter, right? Mm-hmm. Just move and adjust that antenna just a little bit. And then all of a sudden I can see the whole world on that box all over again, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's a lot of what I think about the practices as. It's just that way to align me, right? This being, so that all of a sudden now there's something so much more available through this box, through this vessel.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So this openness, this spaciousness, this readiness, this beautiful emptiness is a prerequisite. It's sort of the purpose of you, making you ready to help another human being.
That's right.
To serve in some way.
That's right. Because you can't keep what you have without giving it away.
And this, of course, is the brilliant, unbelievable download, which sort of resulted in the 12 steps in the first place. Just this one person working with another person in that form of service. But of course, we can take a much broader look at service, not just in the 12-step sense of service, sponsoring another person through the steps, but also just being in the attitude of service.
That's right. That's right. We are a part of this collective, right? And I love the thought, right? And I know this one comes from more religious domain traditions, but it also very much comes from Eastern thought, right? I'm in this world, right? So I am a spiritual being and I'm having a human experience. Both things are true. Both things are true. And I can't deny my humanness and bypass that with spirituality. I have to recognize that I'm both. I've got my foot in this human world, and I am a spiritual being. Both things are true, right? And so I have to be a part of this collective. I am a part of collective consciousness. So I add to that, right? And so what do I give to that collective consciousness? What do I bring? What do I contribute to that collective consciousness?
And would, in your opinion, would it be fair to say that the process of the 12 steps, the process of yoga, the point of a religion or any path, any spiritual path, is to help you to go from a person who is focused in the physical, focused on self, small self, to be able to grasp, expand focus to all that is, and to find a way to express oneself to the interests of others that goes beyond just your own self-interest. Is that the point?
I don't know if I can answer that big of a question. I just don't know. What I can say for me is that it's the recognition that I am more than just this 5 sense reality, that there's much more that's available and possible. And part of it for me is, again, that whole thing, you can't keep what you have without giving it away. You know, for me, that just says it all. And, you know, that phrase, I am in this world, but, you know, I'm not of it, right? So there's something beyond this 5 sense reality. There's an expansion that's available beyond that. And it's been, for me, the work in the 12-step program, and the work in yoga, and the work in those practices that have made that real in my life. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nikki. I recognize that, you know, that's an esoteric,
a big
question,
existential question. Yes.
Yeah. But I appreciate having your thoughts about it. And before we go today, I wanted to ask if you would share how people can get involved in the work that you're doing, Y12SR. I know that you have expanded offerings, and that the trainings and the leadership work you're doing, and I just think it's some of the most important work in the world right now. I think it's changing the way that people look at addiction and recovery. And I think the combination of these two paths, the path of yoga strengthens the path of the 12 steps. The path of the 12 steps strengthens the path of yoga. How can people get involved? Where do they find you? And what would you suggest as a first step for people who are just learning about your work?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for saying that, because that is the big thing for me. That we talk about it as addiction, and people generally think about that in terms of a substance. But, you know, I like to say, you know, we're all addicted to the way that we think. We're all addicted to the way that we process reality. And so this helps us to look at both the 12 steps and yoga, helps us to look at, again, what's beyond the way that we individually process, you know, reality, that there's something else, that there's something beyond all that. And, you know, I like to speak about it as being beyond duality. And for me, that there's something in there that applies to a lot of the ills that we see manifesting in our world today, including things like racism, sexism, all of those kinds of things as well. That I think at their heart, that what we're dealing with, just like in addiction and attachment, that this is a spiritual crisis, right? And the 12-step program has always said, they've always said that it's a spiritual program, right? Right? It's not religious, but it's a spiritual program. It has to do with regaining our own spirit, right? And so we can give it away. So you can find out about Y12SR from y12sr.com. Y12SR stands for the Yoga of 12-Step Recovery. And there are meetings now. I don't even know how many, over 300, many more than 300 actually, going on all across the country and really now all across the world, beginning to melt all across the world. And it just has proven to be something that made sense in this and whose time it comes. So really, really, really grateful for that. And in order, you can be trained in order to hold Y12SR meetings in your own home community. And there's a process for that. It's called the Y12SR trainings. And you can look on our website and find out where they are. They're being held all across the world as well. And so you can find out about that. And then there's another offering that I am deeply, deeply grateful for and committed to, that we offer in Y12SR, and it's around this work around codependency. It's called Breaking Barriers, Transforming the Samskara. Samskara is habits or patterns or impressions, right, that get embedded. Breaking the Samskara of codependency. And we define codependency in Y12SR as the disease of the lost self. So it has to do with exactly what we've been talking about. We lose ourselves. And so this talks about the process of regaining our sense of all parts of ourselves, reclaiming, remembering, all of those things, all parts of ourselves, to bring them in, right? Because we have to do that before it's possible to completely surrender. You have to bring them in first.
Nikki, we're trying to attract people. We're trying to bring people in. Don't tell them about the codependency thing yet. Like we're trying to get them in, you know.
It's a beautiful thing. I'm telling you, simple, not necessarily easy.
Sure.
And beautiful. So there's that work too. So, and you can find out about it all on www.y12sr.com, and it'll give you everything. Tommy, I thank you from, how I know you know how I feel about you. You're my brother, right?
Love you, Nikki.
Yeah, we've been doing this deal for a while, and I'm so grateful and so honored to be a part of your life. I feel like, you and Kia are just so dear to me at so many levels. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do it again, and I can't wait to see you again soon, and we'll connect at Kripalu in May.
Yes, I love it.
So yeah, for you guys listening, recovery. It's the recovery, the
Yoga, Meditation, Addiction Recovery Conference.
Addiction Recovery Conference at Kripalu. Memorial Day. I think it's the 29th of May. I think it's through June 1st or 2nd. Go to kripalu.org and come and practice with Nikki and Ralph Gates and myself and Melody Moore and a number of others.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I love it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nikki.
All right.
All right.
Bye, Tommy.
Be well.